Makahanya haramita shingyo genji saiboza gyojin hanya haramita jishoken gon gai gudo isai gu yakusha.
Welcome back to our series of talks on the 10 bull herding pictures. We now arrive at picture number 6, and this is entitled Returning Home on the Back of the Bull. Now the struggle is over. Gain and loss too have fallen away. The herdsman sings an old folk song or plays a nursery tune on his flute. Looking up into the blue sky, he rides along on the back of the bull. If someone calls after him, he does not look back, nor will he stop if tugged on the sleeve. So beginning with our picture, here we see our herdsman and our bull have now very much come together. The herdsman rides atop of the bull, and there we can see he's actually sitting, he's sitting facing forward, but he's actually turned to one side. He's not even looking where the bull is going. And there we can see in his mouth is a flute on which he plays this simple folk tune, as the preface describes it. And the bull, in his turn, there he's almost skipping along that road. We can see his head is lifted up, and it's almost as if he's going along jauntily, almost dancing along, maybe even singing along with it. It certainly looks as if the same spirit is engaging them both at one and the same time, and this very much has the flavour of this picture. It's much lighter than even the previous picture, actually. If we remember, in the previous picture, the herdsman was still leading, and the bull was trotting along behind him. And we also talked very much about this trust that was building up between the two of them. And we can see that now they've very much come together. We're a long way now, a long way along the path. If we recall 2 pictures ago, the bull was fighting the man, and the herdsman was pulling the bull in one direction, which was trying to go off in the other one. But here is almost 180 degrees in the opposite. Now they've really come together, these two. One rides atop the other. And we remember, please, that the herdsman represents that essential human nature, and the bull himself represents that very wild, elemental powers of the heart. And this returning home on the back of the bull, well, actually what the herdsman represents is the home to which the bull is returning. Because what has happened in our ordinary human predicament is that elemental force with which we are born, which is inherited, which is displays itself in our passions and in our emotions, in our mood swings, in our obsessions, in our desires, in our fears as well. That tremendous elemental energy has become divorced from our instinctual or our human nature, which is our true nature, of course. Here we are in the human form. And because those two have become separated from each other, we bob up and down in what's known as the ocean of birth and death. And we just refer back to that Buddhist wheel of life with its 6 realms, we can see that only part of the time are we human. Sometimes we're hungry ghosts, sometimes we're fighting demons, feeling the world is a hostile place. Sometimes we are shot up into the heavenly realms, and sometimes we're down in the hell realms in our despairs, and so on. And only some of the time are we actually human. And of course, again, just to remember that this is human in the Eastern view, which is the best of being human. Those things that are considered the best qualities of being a human being. And so here in this picture, we can see that these two really now have come together. They've not become one, but they have at least come together to a very great degree, about as close as they can be without merging into each other. And that comes in the next picture, of course. But also to remind ourselves, because we've been using this term heart, and sometimes we see the translations in the books on Buddhism, the term mind as well with a capital M. And just to remind ourselves that this is a translation of a Pali and Sanskrit word, chitta, spelt C-I-T-T-A in the texts, pronounced chitta, for which there's no exact translation into English. We're using the term heart or heart-mind. Often it's also called seat of consciousness as well. Sometimes it's also other words are used, like vijnana, which means sense consciousness. And perhaps at this point it might just be useful to go off at a slight tangent and talk about some of the Buddhist doctrines, particularly some of those we find in the Mahayana. Because this term chitta, as I said, doesn't have an exact translation, but the Buddha spoke about it in many different ways. And of course, in our practice of meditation, in our practice of mindfulness or daily life practice, what we are investigating, in fact, is this chitta. And chitta, as we've said, is if you, to use at least make an approximation, it's the place where consciousness is actually experienced. And if we stop for a moment and just consider, what is it right now that we are experiencing? Well, we are experiencing through consciousness. So, and consciousness is not a thing. It's not like it's a liquid or a solid or a gas or something. It's a function. It's a functioning. We're conscious of something. So there might be consciousness, hopefully, of this talk. We might also be conscious of the room around us. We might be conscious of tactile sensations, the feeling of our feet on the floor or our backside on a seat or something. We may also be conscious of what's going on in the mental realm too. We might be conscious that we are thinking, or we might be conscious about our mood or how we feel. So this consciousness is always consciousness of something, either of a physical object or of a mental object. And the place where all this is experienced, this is chitta. This is what's referred to as chitta. Sometimes it's also called the Buddha heart as well, because consciousness is that which knows. It knows that this is hard or soft. It recognizes not only that this is a human voice that's speaking, but also understands the meaning of those noises that are actually coming through the headphones right now. It's recognized as a human voice, as a male human voice, and also that words are being spoken. It's not just random sound, it's words, and that these words convey a meaning, and that meaning comes up quite naturally in chitta. In fact, if I want to listen to this voice that's speaking now, and just hear it as pure sound, not as words, and certainly not as words with meaning, can I actually switch it off by an act of will? Well, try. Is it possible for you to stop understanding these words? I mean, of course you can take the headphones off, but leaving the headphones on, listening to this voice, can you just hear it as pure sound, with no meaning attached to it at all? Chances are no. Actually, these things are given. Not only do we hear involuntarily, if the ear is there, and the sound is coming in, then we hear it, and the ear is functioning okay, we hear it. And not only do we hear it, but we recognize it, and that function of recognition cannot be stopped either. And if it's words, and it's words, a language we speak, then the meaning comes up as well. So in fact, this vijnana, this consciousness that's functioning cannot be turned off. And the Buddha described this consciousness in several teachings, one in particular called the 18 Dhatu. And the 18 Dhatu describe the 6 sense bases in Buddhism. We have the 5 physical sense bases, which we're familiar with: the eye, the ear, the nose, and the tongue, and also the body. And then there's the 5 objects of those, which are obviously smells, touches, tactile objects, sights, sounds, and tastes. And then there's the 5 consciousnesses that are attached to them: seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling. But then there's also the mental consciousness as well. And in Buddhism, the 6th consciousness is called the organ of mental cognition, or mano, as it was called in Pali. And it has objects too, such as thought objects, or emotion objects, or memories, or perceptions, or any of the mental cognitions and functionings. And then there's also the allied consciousness, such as thinking, such as emoting, such as remembering, such as willing, such as intending, and all those as well. And if we add all those together, you have 6 sense bases, 6 objects of those sense bases, and 6 allied consciousnesses, or 6 vijnanas. That makes a total of 18. And this is all of which we can be conscious. And the Buddha therefore called this teaching of the 18 Dhatu the All. And it encompasses the entire universe, both externally and internally, both physically and mentally, or spiritually, if you like. This is the All. And he said that of this consciousness that it is in constant flux, and that this consciousness is made up of elements, and that these elements are called dharmas. And this is unlike the Dharma with a capital D, which usually means the Buddha's teaching, or the inherent law of the universe, or nature. The Dharmas usually written with a lowercase d, and it represents the almost like a moment of consciousness, just a single moment of consciousness, and that these moments of consciousness are strung together like beads on a necklace, and that they follow each other in rapid succession, and they give the impression of phenomena. It's rather like, for example, if we go to the cinema, and in the days when they still showed film through, the old celluloid film, we go and sit into the cinema, and there is a blank 2-dimensional screen, and behind us is the projector, and a light shines through the projector, and in between the screen and the light source there is a film frame, and on that film frame there is a little picture, and that picture gets projected out. That picture is a combination of lines and colours, and that gets projected onto the screen. And it's just shown for a brief instant, and then the shutter closes and the ratchets move, and the next film frame comes into view. The shutter opens, the light shines through, and then that next picture then shows through. The shutter closes, the ratchets move the film on, and the third frame is now lined up. The shutter opens, the light shines through, and so on. But this is happening so quickly that we do not see those separate pictures. And in the same way, we do not see the separate dharmas. What we see is the phenomena, the compounded phenomena, which are compounds of these elements over time, that seem to arise. And even though we know we're in a cinema looking at a 2-dimensional screen, and all we are seeing are light shadows, on that screen we can see a whole story unfold. We can see lives begin. We can see people grow up. We can see the events in people's life. They can travel from New York, they can travel to Delhi, they can go to Sydney, they can travel to Vladivostok, they can fall in love, they can fall out of love, they can grow old, and they can die. And all the events that we see on the screen take place. And it appears to be stories of lives and people and objects and places that are unfolding. But actually, the whole thing is taking place on a simple two-dimensional screen. And it's the same with chitta. In chitta, our lives appear, and objects appear, and phenomena appears, and history occurs, and things come to be and things cease to be, and we experience states of consciousness. And sometimes we're fighting demons, and sometimes we're hungry ghosts, and sometimes we're even human, and even Buddhas appear in this world as well. But the whole of it takes place in chitta, in consciousness. And this is what the Buddha termed the all. And underpinning this now, this is now where we come to the Mahayana. There's a certain Indian Mahayana school called the Yogacara, who took that framework of the all and said that this consciousness rested on a foundation, and this foundation was called the alaya, or the alaya vijnana, which means the storehouse, or the storehouse of consciousness. And the storehouse of consciousness was really developed to explain where the karmic seeds go. Hopefully we're familiar with the Buddhist doctrine of karma. We know that every intentional action produces a karmic seed, and that karmic seed sooner or later must bear fruit. And it may not bear fruit immediately. It may be a week ahead, it may be a year ahead, it may be countless lifetimes ahead, if we're looking at this doctrinally, many aeons ahead. And so where do those seeds live? Well, the alaya was developed to explain this is why it's called the storehouse, because it's the storehouse of karmic seeds. So within the alaya lie the potentiality of all beings, lies the potentiality of the future. And of course the future is laid down in the past. Our actions condition. This is basic doctrine of karma. Our actions from the past condition all becoming for all beings. And so the alaya, because the alaya is something that is shared, it's not individual, although there are individual layers within it. The alaya has a seed mix, and all our actions, all our intentional actions of body and speech and thought, even thought, which are intentional, go into that seed mix. And this is why in Buddhism we have these lists of skillful actions and unskillful actions. Skillful actions lead us out of suffering and lead towards Buddhahood, and unskillful actions lead us to increased further delusion and further enmeshment and enmired within suffering also. And within that seed mix, within the alaya, there are clusters of seeds, because like seeds tend to come together. And this is what forms the personality traits. And this is why in one moment we can be looking at somebody and they may be perfectly calm, and in the next moment they may be a fighting demon or a hungry ghost. We can't see where that fighting demon or hungry ghost came from, but we know that those seeds arose out of the alaya, and when it vanishes again, the new seeds that have been performed by the intentional actions of that hungry ghost and that fighting demon go back into the alaya, and they will reseed the alaya. And like produces like, so actions of hungry ghosts produced future hungry ghosts, and actions of fighting demons produced future fighting demons. And we may look at these things and think of them as rather sort of prosaic, but actually we can see there a fundamental of a very clear psychology, and this is Buddhist psychology. And this is what we've been dealing with up to now. We have been dealing with this coming to be and ceasing to be. We've been dealing with this coming together. And of course, if our future potentiality, if our becoming is laid down in the alaya, then it's very important what we do. And this is why we undergo a training. And this is why the training also has to be very thorough. When we look at this picture again of the herdsman and the bull who are now together, this has not come about out of nothing. This has come about out of that very long training. And when we talk about the trust and the faith that's been built up between the two of them, well, that's also part of that seed mix as well. It has to be laid down. And this is also why in the Mahayana we have that bodhisattva vow too, because the bodhisattva vow seeks to be of benefit to all sentient beings. A bodhisattva takes that vow that no being can go into nirvana on its own. It will turn back and show all other beings to liberation. Well, if we see that the alaya is collective, is something that is shared, then we can see why. That in fact even doing our own training, just our own training, it's not for me alone. If that seed mix is shared, then in that emptying out of our own heart, or that transformation of our own heart, even without necessarily intentionally going out to do good works, we find that this has a mysterious effect on the rest of the world because of that complete interrelatedness which that alaya allows. And there's a lovely story along those lines about the bodhisattva Manjushri. Manjushri is the bodhisattva of wisdom. He's often pictured as a youth, holding aloft a flaming sword with which he cuts through the bonds of ignorance. Well, in this particular story, Manjushri was born into a period of time called the Kali Yuga. And the Kali Yuga is the end time. This is the period leading up to the just before the destruction of a world system. And in this time, the beings who are born in this time have long ago lost the Dharma. Buddha Dharma has been lost. There's no chance of liberation. And not only that, the beings are themselves so emired in delusion that even if they were taught the Dharma, they would revile it because they could not possibly understand it. They lack the capacity to understand, let alone practice the Dharma. And of course, to revile the Dharma is karmically considered very bad indeed. Well, Manjushri was born into this era. And the thing is that being a bodhisattva, his very being, the soul of his being, is to bring all beings to liberation. Yet he realized at one and the same time that if he tried to bring beings in the Kali Yuga, if he tried actively preaching to the beings in the Kali Yuga, that they would revile him and they would revile the Dharma and they would almost certainly be condemned to the deepest hells. So quite literally, to teach them the Dharma would be to condemn them to hell. And obviously he didn't want to do that, and so he instead decided that he would just do his own training, and he would become what's known as a Pratyeka Buddha. And the Pratyeka Buddha is a being who simply seeks his own deliverance. So he went out into the forest and built a small meditation hut and lived in a very remote place, and there did his own practice. But of course it doesn't really matter how far away you go. People being curious, they find you out, and sure enough, people did find him out, and the rumours spread. Who was this strange one who was living alone in the forest and sitting on a rock with his legs crossed? What was he doing? No one had ever seen anyone sitting in meditation before. This was completely unheard of. And so people would ask him, "What are you doing?" But he wouldn't reply, because that would have meant he would have started teaching them. And he couldn't do that. So he just maintained the noble silence. But people were intrigued. People love a mystery. And so the word spread, and he eventually became something of a spectacle. And people would travel from far and wide to come and see him and look at him. And as he continued sitting, and it went on and on and on, and he maintained this silence, people began to become in awe of him. how could he do this? Where did he get the strength from to be able to just sit and just maintain this discipline? Because they themselves didn't have this at all, and they were really in awe of him. And despite the fact that he didn't teach them, they felt quite naturally that they wanted to help him. And so whenever anyone noticed that his robe was getting a little bit thin, they would bring him a new one. And they brought him food, and if someone noticed that the roof on his hut was needed mending, then they would mend it. And of course what they were doing was offering dana. They were offering gifts to someone who was practicing the Dharma. And that meant that they were themselves accruing good karma. By accruing the good karma, by offering that dana, they were ensuring that in a future life, in a future becoming, they would be born in a world and in a realm and at a time and with a capacity to hear the Buddha Dharma, to understand the Buddha Dharma, and to be liberated by the Buddha Dharma. So even though Manjushri did not intend to help or to save any of them, he did. And that is simply because it's the nature of the Bodhisattva to do that. And it's a wonderful story because there's that real sense of coming together, and yet this is the heart of what the Chinese called wu wei, or non-intentional actions. It's not that he didn't do anything. He did. He just did his own training. That's a doing. But he didn't intend to save the whole world, and yet he could not help himself. And by that strange concatenation of circumstances and the strangeness of the Dharma with a capital D, which is in its essence is quite mysterious, he was indeed able to fulfill his bodhisattva vow in that realm. And with this picture, we are now beginning to enter into that realm. Up to now, things have, as has also been said before, have been very psychologically based. But now we are beginning to enter into the realm of the truly spiritual, or perhaps what we should say, the truly religious. Because the mark of the religious is that linking back into something that's greater than myself. A little bit with the psychology, there's always this sense that it comes back to myself and that it's from myself to myself. But with the religious, it goes beyond. And this is the meaning also of the term paramita, which we will be coming across, the parameters, the 6 parameters, which is the central bodhisattva practice. It's the central practice in walking the Buddha's way to Buddhahood, to perfect enlightenment. And we're now getting close to that, because with that parameter, it means going beyond I, going beyond what I think, first of all, I can do, how I see myself, my own opinions, and so forth, and entering into completely new territory, into a world that previously I could not even conceive of. I could not even conceive of. It's rather like death in that way. There's, I'm sort of reminded of that piece of work by the artist Damien Hirst, and I sort of paraphrase the title, but it was one of his early works, The Impossibility of the Conception of Death in the Minds of the Living. For us, we like to think that we can conceive what death is. We either conceive it as a particular type of afterlife, maybe paradise, or maybe just future incarnations. Reincarnation is also a form of afterlife. Or we conceive it as just being nothing at all, that when we die, that's it, we go into the grave, the lights are switched off, so to speak. But of course, both of these are conceptions from the point of view of I being alive. Either there's someone to go on and enjoy that, or to suffer out that afterlife, whatever it may be, or someone to stop, to get switched off. But of course, both of these are from the point of view of I. And so when the Buddha was asked this question, the answer he gave, in fact, was simply to refer back to what's known as the Praticca Samutpada, which is you can find on the very edge of the wheel of life. This is known as the 12-link chain of arising due to being, and it's like saying coming to be and ceasing to be, coming to be and ceasing to be. And it feels unsatisfactory, yes, but who is it that comes to be? You know, when I die, am I reborn or am I not reborn? And the Buddha says it's coming to be and ceasing to be. If you think it's one, then that's not quite right. If you think it's the other, then that's in error too. What we have is simply coming to be and ceasing to be, coming to be and ceasing to be. We think we know what that means when we hear it, but it's not. It's not what I conceive it to be. Death is a complete mystery to me. I cannot know about it. Why? Because I'm alive. So I cannot conceive of it. Now the struggle is over. Gain and loss too have fallen away. Gain and loss, that pair of opposites. The original pair being, of course, I and other. Life and death too, of course, are opposites. I am alive, and I don't like to think about my own death. It frightens me. Because, well, but what frightens me? Death or the thought of death? But then whose thought of death is it? Isn't it just my own conception again? Once again, I'm frightening myself with my own self-created ghosts. These that arise just now out of the alaya. The herdsman sings an old folk song or plays a nursery tune on his flute. And what's important here is that it's an old folk song. It's a simple song, a very simple tune. It's not a sonata. It's nothing complicated in that at all. It's something that comes from, on the one hand, it's very old. It's very traditional. On the other hand, it can literally be created on the spot. It's something that's very simple. It's that arises out of the creativity, the spontaneity of the heart, unmediated, unmediated by my desire to impress or to make money from it, or anything like that at all. The American mythologist Joseph Campbell talked about following your bliss. And when asked what that bliss was, he said, it's something that is done for its own sake. It cannot be for anything. It cannot be to make money or to get me a job or to enhance my status or to make me look good. It just has to be done for the pure love of itself, for the love of itself. And that is the spirit in which this old folk song or the nursery tune is being played as well. Looking up into the blue sky, he rides along on the back of the bull, and that blue sky with no clouds in it. In other words, there's nothing now to obscure the view. If someone calls after him, he does not look back, nor will he stop if tugged on the sleeve. This is really now that those distractions, that tendency for the heart to get pulled this way and that way by what I like and what I don't like, what I'll put up with, what I won't put up with, all those limitations that I place on myself, and they are self-placed as well. These are the things that I say that I can't do. I can't live without. I must have those 2 cups of coffee in the morning, otherwise I can't function. Although I must have things like this, otherwise my life falls apart. This is where the passions come into play. But all that now has really been left behind. But the path hasn't come to an end, not at all. We're only just over halfway through. And so we'll stop there for now, and we wait to see what happens next.
Yate haraso yate boji soaka anya shin